The ongoing migrant crisis, the possibility of a government shutdown, and should the governor appoint a commission to examine the impact of slavery? The Point starts right now. Mike Lawler is a freshman congressman with a lot on his plate. And when I say a lot on his plate, he's only here today because they were not able to reach an agreement on a deal that would prevent the shutdown of government. Next week is D-Day. What's going to happen?
Well, look, I think it's critically important that we do everything we can to avoid a shutdown. I have implored my colleagues in the House Republican majority to work together to pass a continuing resolution so that we can keep the government funded while we work on the appropriations process. But some of them are just hell-bent on, their way or the highway, and they are doing everything they can to shut down. And so I've made it very clear. If they refuse to pass a CR, I will work to pass a bipartisan CR with folks like Congressman Josh Gottheimer, who I'm a member of the Problem Solvers with. He's done a great job working with Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, and we've crafted a bipartisan CR to keep the government funded while we focus on addressing major issues, including reining in spending long-term and securing our border.
But with people like Congressman Matt Gaetz and others who have been bedeviling the speaker, is there enough Republicans in the Problem Solver caucus that can team with Democrats to pass something that is A, bipartisan, but B, would be passed by the Senate because you need a two-house approval?
Look, we're a divided government, and the Democrats control the Senate and the White House, and so any final bill would have to be bipartisan. And we have 32 Republicans in Problem Solvers, 32 Democrats. This bill that we have crafted would continue to fund the government for 3 months, but more importantly, it would address the border with Remain in Mexico as a policy. It would deal with Ukraine. It would deal with disaster relief and put together a debt commission, which is critical to deal with our long-term spending problems, which have created so much of the crisis that we're facing.
So let's take the issues one by one because everybody wants to know about them. But let's talk about the Ukraine first. There's not a lot of appetite among your Republican colleagues to continue to give money to Ukraine for the war. Where do you see this ending up, seeing as the White House has made a lot of promises?
Well, I think the White House here has failed to provide Congress with clear direction as to what the end game is here. What's the plan to bring this to a resolution? Obviously, we cannot sustain this unlimited, but I have said repeatedly, I support the effort in Ukraine. We need to make sure that Vladimir Putin is not successful. He's a vile dictator and thug. My wife is from Moldova. Her family lives 30 miles from the Ukraine border, and I believe very strongly, if Putin is successful in Ukraine, he will not stop there. He will go after those former Soviet satellite states. And so we have to find a swift resolution here. But to just cut off the funding would be a disaster for the United States and our allies.
But you see, what you said is you have to prevent Putin from doing what he's been doing. But that, in a sense, says you have to keep funding the Ukrainian effort. And how long can you continue to do that without a resolution? Is there something more that the United States can do to force the two sides to come together and end the war?
Well, mind you, most of our funding has actually been going to rebuilding our stockpiles here because we've given the Ukrainians a lot of our military weaponry. But our allies, France, Germany, they need to step up their game. The EU needs to step up its game. The United States cannot be, the solely responsible here. But we have a situation where Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have formed an unholy alliance, and we can't be blind to that, and we can't backtrack or retreat from our standing in the world as the leader of the free world and standing up to dictators and despots wherever they may be.
But talking about building up our resources, our defense spending, sort of begs the question of what happened in Washington this past week, where a bill to fund the Pentagon was voted down. I mean, the rules that was voted on. So is there a move afoot on the part of Republicans in Congress to try to cut the Pentagon budget, the defense budget?
No, I think you'll see the defense budget will increase because we need to make sure that our military is prepared, that our equipment is rebuilt, our stockpiles, and that it is fully up to date technologically. But long term, we do have a spending crisis in Washington. Joe Biden increased spending by over $5 trillion in 2 years. That is unsustainable. You see it in states like New York, where we have a $9 billion budget deficit. We have to get our spending under control. That's what we're working on through the appropriations process. But our military is critical, and we have to make sure that our defenses are strong.
But what are we talking about cutting? I know there's some appetite in the Republican Party to reduce Medicaid benefits or reduce Social Security benefits. Do you see that happening? And where do you think the cuts will come?
Look, I've said repeatedly, I will not cut Social Security or Medicare. We have to make sure both programs are fully funded and sustainable long term.
That means more money.
If we do nothing right now, both programs are going broke over the next decade. Part of what I and many others have been advocating for is a long-term debt commission that focuses on our mandatory spending and how we sustain this for the long term. 70% of our budget is mandatory spending. So what we've been fighting over is 30%. And mind you, when we're walling off defense or veterans or homeland security, what we're really talking about is less than 10% of spending. So
where can
it's critically important that we address our long-term spending challenges, that we make sure that both programs are fully sustainable. We're going to have to look at what potential changes with Social Security. Do we lift the tax cap, for instance, as one vehicle to make sure these programs are funded?
When you say that, you mean that people who contribute money from their salary would pay more towards Medicaid over the course of their working life?
Correct. But that's one potential option that we have to look at long term. And you know, obviously Social Security and Medicare are always the third rail, and politicians on both sides don't want to deal with it. But when 70% of our debt is coming from mandatory spending, we have to deal with it long term.
But is there an appetite to deal with that with the 2024 election coming up, when it's clear that it's going to be one of the issues that are raised in the election on both sides?
Look, both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the leading frontrunner on the Republican side, have said we don't want to touch it. And so what Congress needs to do, and members
but
of
raising
both
taxes
parties,
is also...
No. Look, that is a potential option. But what Congress has to do is take responsibility here and say, look, this is a long-term challenge. We have to look at our debt. We're at $33 trillion. We can't sustain that. When I was in high school, we were under $10 trillion in debt. This is totally unsustainable.
Cut foreign aid?
Look, we have reduced foreign aid, and that is going to be one of the budget cuts that you see here. But foreign aid is such a small portion of our spending that is, you know, penny wise, pound foolish.
Let's talk about the migrant question. What do you want to see happen at the border?
We need to secure it. You know, Joe Biden, since he took office, nearly 6 million migrants have crossed our southern border. Eric Adams, Kathy Hochul, Democrats in New York have had sanctuary policies, refusal to cooperate with ICE, right to shelter. They've used taxpayer money to provide free housing, health care, education, clothing, food. And then they decry the fact that over 100,000 migrants have come here in the last year. Well, when you're handing everything out, of course people are going to come here. They're desperate. We need to secure our border. We need to stop this massive inflow. We need more border personnel. We need more court personnel to hear these asylum cases expeditiously. As I've said many times, this is not about being against immigration. My wife is an immigrant. We've gone through this process. It's a fundamentally broken system. We need to fix it. But we can't do that if we continually are having 10,000 migrants cross the border every week.
So will the migrant issue affect what happens at the ballot box in 2024, not only in the presidential race, but in the races in New York where there are Republican congressmen, freshman Republican congressmen, who are looking for re-election?
Look, in some respects, I think this is more potent an issue to voters than cashless bail was last year. communities all across New York State are being impacted by this. I had one school district take in over 1,000 migrants. This is unsustainable. And people are frustrated. You know, for instance, I'll give you a case in point. For schools, our children are required to get vaccines. But if you're a migrant coming here, not required. People are looking at this going, what is going on? Where is the common sense? Why are we not securing our border? Why are we not fixing the broken immigration system? And why are we not focused on providing for our citizens? That's what people are angry about right now.
Congressman, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.